on the point. There we go.
Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone turned in their green sheets if they're requesting to speak before the board, before I call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the October the 25th, 2021 Board of Education meeting for the Cedar Rapids Community School District. The meeting is now called to order. And I want to thank all of you that have come tonight to share your opinions with the board. As a reminder, we take public comments near the beginning of every regular meeting of the school board. And if you miss the deadline or wish to speak again, our next meeting will be Monday, November the 15th. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that the agenda of Monday, October 25th, 2021 Board of Education meeting and work session be approved as set forth, and that each item is considered ready for discussion and/or action.
Is there a second?
I second.
This is a roll call vote.
Director Garlock.
Aye.
Director Merschbach.
Aye.
Director Tominski.
Aye.
Director Newman.
Aye.
Director Borcherding.
Aye.
President Humbles.
Aye. Next, we'll turn to Superintendent Bush for her report.
Thank you so much, President Humbles, and good evening, Board of Directors. Good to see everyone here as well as our both in-person and our online crowd. Thank you for joining this evening. Just a quick note, last Friday in our electronic newsletter, I just wanted to give a sincere thanks to all of our families participating in parent-teacher conferences right now. It's a heavy time to update kids, but also just a huge shout out to our staff members who have done incredible heavy lifts this fall. I said that in my newsletter that it does feel like October. The fall is finally here. The cooler weather is upon us. We've had an incredibly warm fall, but there are parts of this year that it feels a little later than that because there's been just a lot of work. And so staff is certainly encountering things maybe that we haven't before. And that is, of course, as we're recovering and moving forward from this past year of living within this pandemic and still living within the pandemic. So I do think that that's not only noteworthy, but incredibly important to recognize not just our certified staff, but all of our staff members and the heavy lifts that have been going on to help our kids every day. And on that note, if you haven't been by to see West Willow, the newer playground is finally here, and so we're seeing progress everywhere, but that too has come with a lot of work. So progress, but definitely we're feeling it. We're feeling it and hoping for some ease coming forward as we move into the later fall. So we had a great event on Saturday, and I want to thank CREA, our Education Association, a specific shout out to Rainey Miller, who a couple of years ago, one of our teacher leaders, thought of this event and said, hey, might we consider? So CREA put a committee together, and the district said, yep, let's use Kingston, and we did it 2 years ago. And it grew this year. Certainly, we had additional trunks for the trunk or treat on this past Saturday, and not just a trunk, but a haunted school bus. Shout out to our transportation department. We had over 1,300 attendees, and I would say that's at least double what we had 2 years ago. So thank you so much for those who participated in that event and our families who came out. It was a beautiful afternoon and certainly something we hope to continue in the future. So just a great afternoon and a lot of fun, and great to see kids breaking in their costumes for the season. In addition, this is a reminder, and we've been putting this information out on our social media as well, but if you have a child who prefers to bring their lunch from home and you want to make sure that it's balanced, it's Take 3 and it's free. That's right. You can not only bring your lunch, but you can also get a fruit, vegetable, and milk included with bringing your own lunch. from our nutrition program. Thank you so much to our nutrition department for making these types of opportunities possible for all of our kids. It is a great thing, and absolutely maybe a little stress-free for parents at home too. You can send the main dish and we'll take care of the rest. And then finally, mitigation updates. You can see we've got two rows here in the green, which has been some improvements. And one other note I want to make about some improvements within our district positivity cases. But as we look at the metrics and thinking about our mask mitigation efforts and what would be those metrics that we're looking to lift using masks as a mitigation effort. The first is that Lynn County positivity rate. As of last Friday, it is now dropped to 12.9%, and you could see 2 weeks ago it was above 14%. It is now below that 14% metric, which we are really happy to see that 7-day positivity rate. That's all populations, all ages for Lynn County. Next one is the transmission level. We are still at an epidemic level, and that's defined by the Iowa Department of Public Health, and there's a link now on our site where folks can see that information. But we are still at that level. However, I think with that first indication of data, hopefully things will keep improving and working in the positive direction. Our COVID-19 positivity rate is still below 2%, which is great. Have an extra piece of data there at the bottom of the screen that highlights this. Just to give you a data point, and on September 10th, we had 105 positivity cases throughout the district. That is staff and students combined. To last Friday, it's 42 cases, so that is a significant decrease, and we are pleased to see that as well. And then finally, the Lynn County positivity rate, however, with the 0 to 17 age group, has had some increase over the past couple weeks. So it's gone from 14 to 15 and now is at 16%. So when we look at our student data has declined over the past month. But this, of course, this particular data point from Lynn County does include ages 0 to 17. So our data would not include children under the age of 5 and nor children within our district. But that's just the update for the current information we have from Lynn County Public Health, as well as our own district-wide data. So we're very glad to see things going in that direction. And then today, as many folks probably saw on the news, and I saw too, that children under the age of 12 looks like soon will have access to vaccination for families who are choosing that option and are wanting that option. Looks like that option is coming forth on the horizon. And as we learn more as a district about that, we'll communicate about that information as we learn. And our Iowa Department of Public Health and Lynn County Public Health will keep us updated as a district. So we'll keep our families updated as we learn more. So thank you for your time, and I hand it back over to you, President Humbles.
And thank you for your update, Superintendent Bush. Are there any board reports? Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question on superintendent's report?
Sure.
When those vaccines are rolled out for emergency use, will we add that to our dashboard or consider changing our dashboard based on a certain threshold to be determined yet of vaccinated students between 5 and 11?
So I think that we could certainly, Lynn County Public Health will have the documentation of our students, children within our district who would have vaccination. And so we could look at a percentage of numbers of students who received vaccination. I think we may now be able to get that information for 12 years old and up. So we could start working on that to perhaps see if we can see that as we move forward with other age populations getting vaccination. The original CDC guidelines as we considered environments was that if 50% or better, now granted this was originally when they came out with the adult vaccinations, was if an environment 50% or better of the adult were vaccinated within an environment, it gave you some mitigation reprieve in regards to masking. So that was of course, that was way back in the winter. So I imagine as children are getting more access, we're going to be getting more guidance around what that might be. Just not sure what that will be yet.
And we don't have any ability to track those vaccinations like we do regular vaccinations at
I'm
this
going
point
to, I'm
right
going to
now.
caution the board not to get into a discussion about this since it's not on
Yeah.
our agenda tonight.
It's not on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to addressing the board on our agenda is communications, delegations, and petitions. Board Secretary Day, do we have any speakers registered to address the board this evening?
President Humbles and members of the board, yes, we have some registrations.
Before we hear from those who have requested to address the board, I'd like to remind you to please state your name and address for the record when called. You will be given up to 5 minutes for your remarks. Board Secretary Day will serve as your timer and inform you when your time is up. In order to abide by the open meeting law, I'd like to remind our speakers that there will be no dialogue between board members and the public during this time, except to clarify the nature of questions or comments from the individual speaking. We have received all requests and will listen to them in the order received. And we ask the audience to refrain from outbursts as a matter of respect for all in attendance. Laurel, could you please call our first speaker?
Our first speaker this evening is Kelly McMahon, and Kelly is here to speak with the board about workload.
Kelly McMahon, 5508 Dassel Drive, Southwest Cedar Rapids, 52404. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Last year, somehow I had a year that was easier than the year before that. The year before that was a doozy, but that's okay. I am drowning this year. I am drowning. My colleagues are drowning. Our windows of tolerance are shut. We need time. The time zone is not going, by the way.
Yeah, the time. Yeah. You get it some, yeah.
So we need time. Thank you to board members last meeting when you expressed the fact that we need our Fridays. Last year, my colleagues, my teen grade level, we had our PLC. We would meet an hour after school, and then we had Fridays to plan. So that way we could be really targeted with our instruction to meet the needs of our students. This year, we have our PLC from 8:10 to 8:50. We come in at 7:10 in the morning to 8:10 to plan for an hour. And I'm not a morning person, but we don't have Fridays. I have less time to do the instructional things I need to plan for my students. I have a child who is doing like second grade math, but I don't have time to get her the instructional materials to challenge her. I need time. We all need time. Friday, I saw this week, curriculum connections, please cancel them. They are a waste of our time. They have never been purposeful. And the last few years that we've done it, I was going to take my personal time that I haven't taken the last few years to take off during that time. Because one, I wouldn't have to write sub plans, and two, my morale would be greatly improved because my time would not be wasted. Then there's the GVC days. We're pulling staff out of buildings when we don't have subs and forcing us to write sub plans, which takes hours to do. For there to maybe not even be a sub there to teach it. We don't have time. Our buildings are stressed. We are drowning. Cancel them. Move them to the summer. That is work that needs to wait. We feel the sense of urgency to meet the needs of our students this year. We know that we have to move their learning at a greater pace than we did last year and the year before. But we can't do that without time to plan, without time to look at our data, without time to really target our instruction. That takes time. My mom called me 2 weeks ago to check in to make sure I was still alive because I haven't been home to visit her. I'm at school every weekend. I'm taking stuff home with me every night. I'm sleeping great, and yes, it is because of the mask mandate, I tell you, because I have a child in my classroom who has severe asthma. But I'm also exhausted. And so that 7:10 morning to get there is very difficult because I want to sleep. Also, our preschool teachers. When I first started in this district 11 years ago, I started out as an early learning teacher where I had students, 20 students, 5 of those could be on IEPs, from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock. That was it. After that, when they left, I had time to plan because I was serving as both a general education teacher and a special education teacher. Our early learning teachers this year, they're beyond drowning. They have already drowned. They're just barely making it. They need their Fridays. To keep coming down here to meetings that are not any useful is a waste of their time, and they need their time. They have up to 40 children, 10 IEPs. That may be the case of a multi-cat teacher and a gen ed teacher. They need their time. Please cancel these pointless meetings and give us our time back, because otherwise we're not going to make it this year. We need your support, and we need you to give us our time. We need to do what's best for students, and what's best for students is giving us our time back. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bernard Clayton. Bernard is here to speak about SROs and mask.
Well, thank you, Madam President, Director, and the rest of the officials of the school board. My name is Bernard Clayton. I live at 1604 6th Avenue Southeast. In a couple of weeks, I've been listening and watching and how school boards across the country have been doing and how school boards in urban doing. And what I see is an intersection of white privilege, infanticide, and infanticide, and the Mandela effect. First of all, on the school resource officer, I thank you for what you did in terms of what you have done. We'll see how the program works and what it's going to do in the field. We will have to see that. And also, as far as the masks are concerned, I'm glad that y'all had a plan in place when the judge said that the state couldn't stop you anymore. And getting back to school resource officer, I'm sorry about wondering, folks. Please forgive me. One news organization, this is proof of the Mandela effect, one news organization said that the school district did not inform them that y'all had took the school resource officers out of McKinley and Roosevelt. I started to call them, but I didn't bother. So, but in education, the purpose of education is to lead people out. That's the literal meaning of education, is to lead out. That's the literal meaning. And I understand why you take young kids and you educate them rather than dealing with us grown folks. It become a little bit more difficult. And I heard many things about the anti-mask people, and I really believe a lot of them really believe what they are saying. Now, the leadership knows better. In Nazi Germany, they told lies and lies, and if you tell a lie enough, it can become the truth. It can become the truth, so if you tell a lie enough. And I remember when I was a kid in St. Louis, I saw Santa Claus go across my transom in my bedroom. I lived in the kitchen, and Santa Claus and his sleigh went by, and I went and told my friends at school. We went back to school, we told what we did during Christmas time. Some of my classmates put their heads down on the desk, and the teacher was nice to me. And even in my adult mind, that scene still looks real, but there's no scientific possibility that could even happen. But I had to figure it out for myself that was not true. So in some instances, there are things that people will have to figure out for themselves. And again, thank you for your service, all you who work here. I don't always agree with y'all, but it never occurred to me to disrespect y'all when y'all did something that I didn't like. And y'all have did things I didn't like, but it's never occurred to me to disrespect you. That never came across my mind. And I'd like to thank all the people who work for the school board for manning the watchtowers of democracy. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kimberly Dooley. Kimberly is here to speak about mental health and test scores.
Kimberly Dooley, 3421 Lennon Lane in Marion, a school district employee since January of 2001. I want to first read an article to the board from the American Academy of Pediatrics. This declaration was made on October 19th, 2021. As health professionals dedicated to the care of children and adolescents, we have witnessed soaring rates of mental health challenges among children, adolescents, and their families over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, exacerbating this situation that it already existed. It existed before COVID. The inequities that result from, children and families across our country have experienced enormous adversity and disruption. We know that very well as a school district. Back to the article. The inequities that result from structural racism have contributed to the disproportionate impacts on children from communities of color. This worsening crisis in child and adolescent mental health is inextricably tied to the stress brought on by COVID-19 and the ongoing struggles for racial justice, and represents an acceleration of trends observed prior to 2020. So things were bad before, and then this was the match thrown on the gasoline. Back to the article, I digress. Rates of childhood mental health concerns and suicide rose steadily between 2010 and 2020. In 2018, suicide was the second leading cause of death for youths aged 10 to 14. This pandemic has intensified the crisis. Across the country, we've witnessed dramatic increases in emergency department visits for all mental health emergencies, including suspected suicide attempts. The pandemic has struck the safety and stability of families. More than 140,000 children in the United States lost a primary or a secondary caregiver, with youth of color disproportionately impacted. We are caring for young people with soaring rates of depression, anxiety, trauma, loneliness, and suicidality that will have lasting impacts on them, their families, and their communities. We must identify strategies to meet these challenges through the innovation and action using state, local, national approaches to improve access to and quality of care across the continuum of mental health promotion, prevention, and treatment. They've made several recommendations for this. I come here stating to you that as early childhood educators and as elementary educators, we are the front line on this. We see the problems often first, while we're supposed to be teaching X, Y, and Z at the same time. At any given point, we can have multiple kids in a classroom who are crying out for help. There's not teaching that's going on during that time. In April of 2021, the CDC put out an article connecting mental health of children and parents, and they are saying that the mental health of children is connected to their parents' mental health. A recent study found that 1 in 14 children has a caregiver with poor mental health. Fathers and mothers and other caregivers who have the role of parents need support, which in turn can help them support their children. The struggle is everywhere, is what I bring this up about. Here's the thing. Last meeting, John Rice spoke about last year's third graders and their ISASS scores. Facts. Those children lost 1/3 of their first grade year. Many were virtual for their second grade year, and all had a 2-week virtual period no matter what they were. Think to yourself, how will this year's third graders do? 1/3 of kindergarten gone, first and second during a pandemic? We can't teach the same way we have been, and kids are showing us that they're not ready for the way that we have been teaching. Thank you very much for your time.
Our next speaker is Lawrence Winklowski. Lawrence is here to speak out about miscellaneous.
Lawrence Winklowski, 4234 Moreau Road, Northeast. Several things I want to talk about. First of all, over the last few meetings, people have been coming up here saying that we have child abuse going on in our school district because of masking. I think to make that statement in public is unconscionable. While I respect people's opinion on masking, there are certain people who are mandatory reporters of child abuse. Medical people who work in the medical field, people who work in education. If they see child abuse, they're supposed to report it, not come to a school board meeting and complain about it. Also, when it comes to any abuse, if people see any sort of abuse, child, spousal abuse, elderly abuse, you have a responsibility to report it. It is not acceptable to ignore it, sort of like what happened to the young lady in Philadelphia last week. It was just tragic. And if you don't want to report it, from my personal opinion, you are less of a person than the person doing the abuse. And then my next comment is, as what happened over the last several meetings, when did it become appropriate to clap and yell in school board meetings or any public meetings? That's there's a certain level of civility we need at meetings. And whether I agree with somebody or not, the fact that they come here to express their opinion, I'm grateful for it because it shows that they want to be involved. And that, at last meeting, I heard someone say about masking, about their responsibility. They keep their kid home when they're sick. And the problem, one of the issues is not everyone has that luxury. And that single parents, people can't afford to take a day off work and that. So that's something that people need to understand the other side of the issue. Being on the school board nowadays is probably the toughest elected position in the country. The way our state and federal governments operate, along with the press, makes it very difficult for our school boards. School boards' decisions make one group of parents happy at the expense of another group of parents. They have to protect some children at the expense of others. It's just the unfortunate thing of especially now, what we're going through. And that the open meetings laws, which I like to refer to as the COMA law, hurts the communications between the community and governmental bodies. The reason I call it the COMA law is the public gets to come up here and talk to the school board, and the law puts you, or any governmental body puts you in a coma because you can't respond to us. So it's like talking to someone in a hospital who is in a coma. I like to believe the school board's hearing from us. However, there's two things with the open meetings law, and that is clarification. I never hear anybody ask for clarification of a statement or rebuttal of any misleading information. Like someone made a comment last week about school board members getting paid. I was unaware that they got paid. I think you should, but I think that you just need to clarify the process and the proceedings here for this community so they understand what is going on. If we were a big family, we would be in therapy. Seriously. And the therapist would tell us to start listening and start communicating. And that because we don't listen, people don't listen and they don't communicate. And when it comes to people coming up and commenting, I'm going to make a suggestion. There's a bunch of you, sit down, come up with a suggestion, an alternative way of doing it. Then just have one person start the presentation and the next one continue it and show us an alternative way to solve a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelsey. Our next speaker is Jessica Camacho, and she is here to speak about the pandemic.
Hello. My name is Jessica Camacho, and I live at 2614 Dawn Avenue Southwest. I'm a parent of a kindergartner and a parent of a student who graduated from Kennedy. I'm also an educator with hundreds of kids I consider my own. I want to talk first about masks. But before I get started, I think it's important to know a little bit about my background. When I was younger, I applied at several local undergraduate schools and was accepted into the University of Iowa's honor biology program. The problem was I went back to school as a non-traditional student, and I was a mom at that point. I considered my options and decided to complete my degree at Mount Mercy. From there, I went to graduate magna cum laude with a degree in biology and education. I know science. When I decided to get my master's, I wanted to go to a school that was known for science and education. So I obtained a master's in science and science education from Montana State. I know science. I have heard a lot of people here go on and on about masks do and do not do for students, but I've also done my research, and I know the truth. In my school, we received daily notifications about COVID prior to the masks. Some days it was 2 or more. I know that many of our students came back okay, but I also know that some of their families did not. I know that one of the greatest principals in the Cedar Rapids School District just died from COVID. And I also know that his children are teachers. I know that my 10-year-old niece was sick with COVID for 10 long days. And even though she had previously had both mono and pneumonia together at the same time, this was the sickest she's ever been. I know that even if they aren't sick, students who are stricken with COVID are home for 10 days and miss out on a quality education. I want masks and vaccinations because I know that wishing away COVID hasn't worked. I want masks and vaccines, because I know that it's easier to fix COVID than it is to fix the educational mess we are currently in right now. But COVID will not go away just by wishing. We have to be proactive in our prevention. Now I want to move on to other pandemics that are hurting our students. Someone recently said to me, those telling teachers how to teach need to understand that we are dealing not with just academic loss, but also social skills regression and a huge maturity freeze. Stop acting as if we're going back to normal, because we're not. We're back in the classroom, but we are not back to normal at all. I am an English language teacher, but I also help in a math class. What I see in that math class is a larger disparity of knowledge than I've ever seen before. The problem isn't just about learning gaps, it's about diverse things that are holding back the kids. In my class, for example, I have about 20% I have one student that's 1 grade level below. That's it. That's the highest student we have. About 20% are at the 1st grade level. This is an 8th grade math class. The problem is that students' path to where they are now isn't the same. Around 15% haven't been in the country before this year. Around 20% have an IEP, and at least 20% of them were in an online class last year that I was a part of and hardly attended, and when they did, they didn't participate. Almost 40% of them have faced some type of trauma in their lives, and it makes it difficult for them to focus. At least 2% are currently homeless. As a teacher, we can't simply come in and teach our students. We have to teach them where they're at, and it is exhausting, as noted. We are pushing a boulder up a mountain and almost nobody is noticing. These circumstances might be difficult as they are, but when we combine that with a lack of support from almost every angle and increased expectations because of less staff, what you are left with is teachers who are quitting before the year is over. I know of at least 5 at my level. This is our other pandemic. Let me be very clear when I say that most of these things can't happen unless we vote. We need free universal free universal preschool with wraparound care so we can reach kids early. We need more playtime and lower grades. We need more time during our day to analyze data and act on it. We shouldn't have to be, I've never heard of a profession that gives almost 0 time for planning, but a lot of expectations about the implementation of those plans. The only way to do our job well is to spend hours outside of our contract time. Less students in our classroom so we can focus on the whole student. Guidelines for behavior. Less incentives around paid programs. Less people making decisions at the top so we can have more support at the bottom. We need to be treated like professionals, not factory workers. We need more money for our paraprofessionals, more mental health care, and finally, a recognition of systemic racism that exists in our school system that is harming our students. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kelsey Butterton, and she's here to speak about para pay.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Butterton. I live at 413 D Avenue, Atkins, and I'm here to talk about para pay. Monday through Friday, I'm a para in an SD classroom. In a typical day, start out by toileting children. I change diapers, I tube feed, I feed to a typical child with regular food, I administer medications, and I help students with their PT, their OT, their communication skills on devices like switches. Not only is it a stressful job, but we have been down 1 to 2 adults in our classroom all year long. So instead of being able to sit with one kid and work with them all day, we have multiple kids to one adult. After all of this, my salary is $12.28 an hour. I was thinking about this a little bit the other day, and I would have to work 4 hours in order to fill my car up with 1 tank of gas. On the weekends, I have a part-time job because my salary is not high enough in my first. I am a cashier. I work with customers to check out their groceries. If they bring their pets in, because it's a pet store, I get to say hi and give their dog or cat a pet, and I get to have a higher wage at this part-time job. I know that in my classroom, my teacher would not be able to meet the needs of her students if she didn't have the working help of us paras in her classroom. Not only should the paras working with children be paid more, but I think it also should be according to the level of the classroom they're in. Paras working in SD classrooms and even Mod ID and Multicat are going to do a lot more responsibility and have more stress weighing on their shoulders than a para in a gen ed classroom. The amount of the medical and physical health responsibilities I handle each day are a lot more stressful, and I think pay should reflect that, and it does not as of now. That's all. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Russell Hodgkiss, and he's here to speak about the mask mandate.
Thank you. As she stated, I am Russell Hodgkiss. I reside at 3341 Chester Road, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 52411. I just moved to this district 2 months ago. Thanks to Ms. Bush, my son has a religious exemption. I had to fight tooth and nail to get our constitutional rights honored here, which was appalling to me, first of all. But second, the science person that's over there, I can read you all the science. I sent it to you in my email today. Read it. Other people before me in previous meetings have read science to you left and right. You appear to be ignoring the actual science, because the survivability rate for children is 99.997%. I'm not saying they don't go through hell with it, but so do people with pneumonia. I've had it 3 times in my life. I know what that feels like. I grew up with bronchitis twice a year. I know what it's like not to be able to breathe. I was a United States Navy diver. You don't have oxygen when you're down below, you can't breathe. So I get it. But guess what? The mortality rate is minuscule. Okay? We're sitting and listening about the mental health here. I'll read some of that science to you. This is coming right from psychologists. The masks impede in their learning both verbal, voice inflection, and facial recognition for word enunciation. Your own data from your school board, I attended just a couple weeks ago, prove that your decisions are having an adverse effect on the students. They said it. They can't pay attention. They're worried about being masked. They don't want to be masked. There's a reason for that. They want to see their peers' faces. My son has asked me that, when do the other students get to have their masks taken off so I can see their faces? You're interfering with my son's psychological behavior because he has to look at people with masks. The CDC actually stated children 0 to 18 basically don't die from COVID. But yet, for whatever reason, I can't figure it out. You people are ignoring that. And that's appalling. I sat there and listened to these people in suits up here a couple of weeks ago talking about your decline in the performance of our students. There you go. Back to the masking. To the person that's tired all day long. It has been proven that masks lower oxygen intake, increase carbon dioxide, resulting in the following symptoms, which is counterproductive to learning and has adverse health risks. Before I knew what the hell was going on, I allowed my son, because my wife and I had to live with her, be masked for 1 month. He went to the nurse's office 10 times in that 1 month. That's when I was like, I was done. I've dealt with the government before, because I have a company that we have to go and regulated by the Department of Transportation. They forced me to learn their laws. And ma'am, you are correct. We're in an emergency use authorization state in the United States. You can't mandate shit. Okay? That's masks and that's vaccines. And if you know what's in those vaccines, graphene oxide, it's poisonous to people. It's a great semiconductor, but it's poisonous to people. Aborted fetal tissue. Any Christians out there? If you agree with that crap going into your body, you don't have a conscience. And Miss Dorcherding, your child psychology degree, if you agree with this, you are absolutely wrong. It is psychologically hurting our children. And you wonder why they're talking about the mental health of them? You're exacerbating it. Pathogens. One study. Holy crap. Pneumonia. Meningitis. Borealis. I know what that is. I've got Lyme disease. You don't want that. It sucks. That was found on masks that were taken after kids when they wore a mask all day long. Severe infections, meningitis, sepsis, diphtheria, Legionnaire's disease, all were found on masks after they wore them all day long. You're subjecting our children to that. Do we have to sue you to get you to stop this? This is a classic case of Munchausen by proxy. Your psychologist knows it.
Excuse me, your time is up. Thank you. Our next speaker is Craig Seeley, Jr. Craig is here to speak about ideologies, agendas, sources, trending methods.
Thank you, honorable board members, for giving me this opportunity. The first kind lady that was up here, she touched her mask 36 times plus to get it back up on her nose. I just wanted to say there is a plastic contraption that can go under your mask that can keep that from happening. This idea of giving shots to children 5 years to 11 years, what happens? I'm concerned about this. What happens if the parents refuse? Will the child be taken out of the classroom? Maybe some people would like that because those places could be taken up by immigrant children. Think of the ramifications of this. Some people are frowning at me on the board. I don't know if they understood what I said. Are the kids that aren't going to take the shots, are they going to be kicked out of school until they take the shots? What are they going to do with the empty spaces? Are they going to be filled with the immigrant kids? Think about the political ramifications of that. But anyway, I've been speaking the last few board meetings, trying to build up to teaching methods. I reviewed certain scripture that helps us understand where we came from and how we're created. Genesis 1:26, we are created in the image of the triune God, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The 139th Psalm 13 through 15, God literally weaves us together in our mother's womb. Think about the ramifications of that. And then Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they won't depart from it. Okay, when you consider all those things, what are you being told? What is the way? The way is the way God weaved the child together. The abilities, the talents, the interests, the IQ, etc., etc. That is the way. And the promise is if you develop that way, when they are older, they won't depart from it. It won't be in vain. But how do you find that way? Parents find it by observing their children for years. But how can school teachers find that way? Well, one thing that you consider is the 4 dominant learning styles: auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and tactile. You can test children or anybody and find, I know there's appropriate age, and find out what their dominant learning style is. They're subdominant, but you can so go against a child's dominant learning style that they don't know how to cope. And then you get into the basic personality types: phlegmatic, I hope I remember them all, melancholy, sanguine, and choleric. And everybody that knows anything about them knows what they mean. You can test for those too. And then you get into most women think with both sides of their brain 24/7. There's reasons for that. Most men, there's always exceptions, Einstein was an exception, think with one side of the brain or the other. So men are goal-oriented, visually stimulated. Women are relationship-oriented and romantically stimulated. So they approach perspectives from a different, slant. And then there's birth order. So when we consider all these things, and I didn't even mention all of them, we can really, if we really find out about each child, then we can treat them like God treats us, individually, on a very precise level. And we will know the children, we will know their IQs, we will know their abilities, their interests, and their talents, etc., etc. We will know how they think to a certain extent. And then we can work with them and develop all these things so that when they get older, they won't depart from that development, like the Proverbs 22:6 says. They will not walk away from it. It won't be in vain, and it will help them to become what God wants them to become.
Mr. Seeley, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Our final speaker this evening is Leah Howard. Leah is here to speak about COVID mitigation.
Hello, my name is Leah Howard. I live at 5930 Flagstone Drive Northeast. I am a teacher at Kennedy High School, have been since 2005. I have communicated with Superintendent Bush and the board privately about this several times, but I wanted to come and publicly thank you all for taking a layered approach to COVID mitigations, including making vaccinations available to staff last spring and instituting a mask mandate as soon as you legally could in the presence of high community spread of COVID this fall. There's been a lot of talk about freedom over fear. As a high-risk pregnant teacher, those first few weeks of school were incredibly fearful. While I wore my mask every day, the majority of my students, and yes, some of my colleagues, did not. Every day walking into school felt like playing Russian roulette. Would that be the day that I contracted COVID from an unmasked student or colleague? Would I bring it home to my disabled 3-year-old daughter? Would anyone in our family need to be hospitalized? Would I become so sick that I had to deliver my unborn daughter before viability at 24, 25, 26 weeks? Would I be around to see her face? With the mask mandate, I will say I've been much less fearful at school. I've been freer to move around the classroom, working with individual students, been freer to work and move around the building. And though I don't look it, I stand before you today at 8 months pregnant, scheduled for a C-section just before Thanksgiving. We all know that in-person learning is far superior to online schooling. And as more and more information comes out, even on our own district dashboard, it is clearer and clearer that the mask mandate will help us all to stay in school safely until COVID is under control in Lynn County. It is my hope that the board and Superintendent Bush will continue to make decisions as they have been in the best interest of public health. I would also like to thank the board members for giving your time and attention to multiple complex issues, not just COVID mitigations. You all do a lot for our schools and for our community, and you deserve credit and recognition for keeping your eye on the bigger pictures as well, amidst undue singular issue criticism. Thank you. This staff member supports you.
That's it.
And thank you. And that ends all the public comments that we received by the deadline for this evening. And our next school board meeting will be November the 15th, which gives you another opportunity to speak before the board. We will be moving on to our consent agenda. Are there any items that a board member would like to pull for comment, question, or separate vote? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? This is a roll call vote.
Director Merschbach. Director Tominski. Director Newman.
Aye.
Director Borcherding.
Aye.
Director Garlock. President Humbles.
Aye. Next, we'll move to administration. It's an update from the Cedar Rapids Community School Foundation. Laurel, could you please introduce our presenters?
I'm pleased this evening. The mission of the foundation, as you all know, is to provide financial support and promote excellence in our school district. They have a direct impact on our students and our staff. And they are here to talk this evening about their wonderful work that they are achieving. And here tonight with us is Dr. Chris Tyler, who is currently the board chair. And is Karen Swanson here this evening? Nope, okay, Karen's out there. Anyway, Karen is here and she's the executive director. And they're here tonight to bring you up to date on their growth and the efforts that they're doing to support the mission of our school district, Every Learner, Future Ready. Dr. Tyler.
It's a pleasure to be here in front of you and appreciate being able to give this report to you in person this year. Our annual report can be found on our website. It went live in September, and I'm here just to touch on a few main points for you all. This is a very good year for the foundation. Despite COVID and the delayed show, we thrived and even grew with committed donors and a mission that resonates in our community very well. Currently, we stand at just short of $1.5 million in total assets, and as a result, we'll be increasing our professional development grants to fund to more than 3 times its normal allotment this year. We have gifted more than $500,000 to district projects and programs, which is nearly double our normal year. And just as a comparison from my report last year, our donors have increased by almost 300 over the past year. Our gifts have grown nearly $300,000 from last year, and our donations are up over $500,000 from last year. As I touched on this last year, our operations committee last year allocated funds to cover 3 years of operation as a safety net in the event that we are struck again by some bad luck. So we wanted to have a public stance of being fiscally responsible with the money that we've been donated. And last, I have to touch on this, and I'm sorry she had to leave, but the main reason we survived and thrived during this challenging year, 18 months, is the outstanding leadership and forward thinking of our executive director, Karen Swanson. Our gift increases and ability to augment our professional development grants are directly related to her efforts, and she deserves some public recognition for this. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any at this time.
Well, first, I'd like to say thank you for the continued support. So appreciated. And also tell, if you could relay our thank you to Ms. Swanson, too. It is so needed and so appreciated. And I was going to open it up to board members if you have some comments that, or any questions for Dr. Tyler.
I have a question. So, hey.
Okay.
I just was wondering, when I was on foundation and there was some discussion that was happening at the time about some estate planning giving, or planned giving, I'm just wondering if anything has happened with that?
That was actually the source of one of our largest gifts last year. So that is a conscious effort on our part to get that out into the community. In fact, I had a conversation just this last week with the widow of the giver of that large gift that is directly related to our professional development grant increase. And she said, when I go, you'll get the rest of my money too. So not that we're planning on that anytime soon, but it's gifts like that that allow us to make the jobs of the teachers and direct impacts on the students that much greater.
That's excellent. Thank you.
You bet.
Dr. Tyler, can you describe for the public what professional development means in reality for our staff?
Absolutely. The professional development grants are tiered in such a way that teachers can apply for grants that would not only augment the tools that they have in their classrooms, but also educational experiences that would help further their professional development and be able to give that back to the students. So it's a way to give back some money to make that process a little bit easier and more streamlined.
I mean, not a question, just a comment. I mean, I'm just extremely impressed with the growth and just the leadership of Karen. So I know that she'll hear it directly from a lot of us because we have the benefit of knowing her in public and your leadership as well. I guess
She makes me look good.
That's true.
Very true.
What are some ways that the community can get involved? So obviously, you mentioned the reports on the website, but some of the other ways that the community can get involved.
Well, we've been lacking a traditional fundraiser the past 2 years. We used to do a Lip Sync for Learning fundraiser, which you got to see some select members of the community make fools of themselves up in front of a large audience, lip syncing to their favorite music. But so with that option off the table for last year and this year, donations, I haven't been on the website lately, but I think there's a link where you can click on and donate directly on the website. And we want to get that fundraiser back on the 2022 calendar, but whether it's through a direct donation or an estate plan like Jennifer mentioned, those are all that information is on the website, but that's a great way to get started.
Anyone else?
Just a comment about an event today, and thank you so much to the foundation for sponsoring the quarterly cuts at Franklin Middle School. Reese is here and was giving me an update, but this is one more way in which the foundation supports an effort for students who maybe don't have access right now to getting their hair cut. They're doing this on the quarter, and how many kids today, Reese? Just shy of 50 students, and also Franklin invited the feeder schools, so some fifth graders from Arthur, et cetera, also had access to that opportunity, but we can't make that opportunity happen. That's a way in which community members who have a gift to share and help kids, but also the foundation helped sponsor that event. So amazing work, so thank you.
Thank you.
Once again. Oh, it is on. Thank you so much, and if you could, and we're just so very thankful and for the continued support. You do make a difference in the lives of our teachers, our staff, our students, and we appreciate it greatly.
Thank you much. The pleasure's ours.
Okay. Thank you. The final item on our agenda is a work session regarding the master facility plan. Superintendent Bush will review the original board-approved facility master plan and share information about the upcoming process that will be used for data collection to analyze with the reconvened Facilities Master Plan Task Force.
Thank you. Thank you, President Humbles. We'll have some co-facilitators this evening. So CFO and Executive Director of Business Services, Dave Nicholson, will be joining us, as well as Buildings and Grounds Manager, John Galbraith. And so the three of us hope to give you a review, as well as a current state and our next steps. So happy to give you, I guess this is pretty high level, but it also, there's a lot of details in this work. And so we are very open to the board's questions as we move forward tonight. So just as an agenda, I'm going to zero in a little bit on our strategic plan, but also give you the review of our timeline that was originally created for the original facility master plan that was adopted in 2018. And then talk about the pause process, which is our current state. We're living in a pause in the moment, and we'll talk about what that pause means on the facility master plan timeline. And then also reigniting that task force as they will come back together to decide what our next steps will be. So with the help of Dave and John, we'll give you an update on our construction results of the first part of the implementation of our facilities master plan, so a financial update, and then also as we engage into the next steps of the original plan, what this means for the rest of our buildings that were not included in the original timeline. So just as a reminder, this is our strategic plan. If you go to slide 3, Justin, thank you, sir. And on our strategic plan, under each one of those focus areas, of course, under the last column there is systems and resources. The facility master plan is one of those strategies. And Justin, if you click on that hyperlink of the theory of action, that will take us to our website. And so we did this last time that showed you, oh, maybe not. Just if you would mind getting to our website, that'd be great. We just wanted to remind you, as well as our community, is where you can find the information about all of our strategies and all of the work that we lift together to move our strategies forward. So what you'll find on this particular part of our website is the actual theory of action that we have. Like, why did we even put forth a facilities master plan, and how are we going to measure the success? So just if you click on systems and resources, thank you, sir. And then scroll on down to the facility master plan. Thank you. You'll see we've got a theory of action here, and then we'll scroll on down, Justin. We've got a couple of actions, and then the measurable work that we're doing. So you can see under these SMART goals right now, some of them include the work that you're very familiar with. Building West Willow, building Maple Grove, and then what will our next steps be as we move forward. So the original timeline included an implementation around our elementary schools. So we just wanted to make sure that you, as well as our community, knows that we'll continue to establish these SMART goals. SMART goals are for the current state. As the Facility Master Plan Task Force comes together, brings information to the board will help compose what our next action steps will be around this work. So now, if we come back to the slide deck, Justin, on the timeline, we originally created with the Facility Master Plan Task Force a tiered approach to the board-adopted plan in 2018. The task force quickly focused on elementary schools, not only from an assessment point of view, but also from a demographic point of view, and the uneven distribution we had within our populations across our system with elementaries, being schools from a little better than 200 to schools, Viola's our largest school at almost 600 students. So that looks at resources as well as the needs within a building and how might we create opportunity throughout our district, as well as improve our facilities that needed some assistance. So very much focused on best practice collaborative learning, equity and access, and improved facilities. So this three-tiered system, Justin, if you go to slide 4, thank you so much, shows you those tiered approach. So the task force looked at this. If you think about these 3 colored boxes, they really represent like a 20-year timeline. And the first orange box was the first chunk of this phase. So the trilogy that was being considered was former Coolidge, current Jackson, and the school that's in between them is Truman. And so the new builds in the orange box would have taken place at the site of Coolidge, which is now West Willow, and the site of Jackson, which is now Maple Grove. And then the school to be repurposed was, of course, to be Truman. And we are currently in the conversations about what the plans will be for Truman. But this is just a reminder for the board as well as the community that we're in this tier 1, phase 1 of this project. And the pause on the timeline happens now so that we can assess not only how these builds have gone, as well as what the reallocation of our students on the west side as they go to 2 new sites. What is our current need? I will tell you what was maybe thought of, or the data that we had in 2018 has changed because of the pandemic and the derecho. So we had families displaced who have moved. Our demographics have changed within some of our buildings and populations. And in addition to that, the derecho damaged every single building. And therefore, some of our buildings got facility attention and maybe a little deeper dive on the assessment of their needs. So we have more information now than we had in 2018. So when the task force gets together, we're going to have to look at our current state data, where we are, what's our enrollment trends, what do our demographics look like, what's the projected enrollment trends, as well as what's the current state of our buildings, and how might we be able to move forward. So this is exciting to consider what those next steps will be. So as you can see, originally the task force thought Arthur might be the next elementary site to consider a build, which could impact some of the neighboring elementary schools to Arthur. But we are not certain just yet until we assess the data as to where the next steps will actually be. So we will continue to assess the population study of our district and take the other information into consideration as well. So we did have a focus group that came together. This was just before we were hit by the pandemic. So in the winter of 2020, and they developed this pause process with us. These were members of the community as well as our staff members. John and Dave and I sat on that committee as well. And so the pause process is really cyclical, and it starts with the steering team, which will be, of course, we're part of that steering team to gather all this information together. And then after we get our information together, that will include the Facility Master Plan Task Force, who will assess the data. Then after we get some data and some input, we've got to bring it back to our community, get community input. We did apply this process to the boundary study. It was literally this exact process we used for the boundary study last year. And then we'll bring it back to a smaller group steering team once we get more of that data input. And then we bring it back to the board. So this constant gather information, assess the information, analyze the information, get it to the community, and get it to the board so that we can keep everybody informed as well as make decisions moving forward. So if you look at slide 6, our timeline is currently in the spring. We looked at our information to make the boundary study decision, and we applied that pause process to the boundary study. We are currently into getting all of our data collected. We've started with, we just certified enrollment. So we'll have our enrollment data. We will have our projected population study that we're working on with consultation. We have an architect assessing the current state of our buildings. The focus, of course, with the facility master plan number 1 is on elementary schools, with also the intent saying it when we came time for this pause process, we had to come back to our secondary buildings and get them assessed as well about what the projected needs would be for our secondary buildings. So that data is being collected right now on our secondary buildings. And then from the winter into the spring, we're going to have to make some recommendations to the board and to our community about next steps of implementation on our facility master plan. So that will include both where to go next for our elementary schools, as well as what are the needs at the secondary level and how do we make plans for that as well. Awesome opportunity. The task force, we have sent an invitation through our e-newsletter as well as reaching out to former members to be a part of that task force. We had a very good response to that, better than 60 people, very balanced from both community and staff saying they'd like to be a part of that process. Meetings will begin here in November, and of course we'll go into the early spring, and we're going to start with the data analysis of all the data that I just discussed with you. Same information, types of information we used with the former Facility Master Plan Task Force. And then, of course, we've got to have frequent updates to the board as we move this information forward. So now we'd like to shift over to digging in a little deeper of the current state as we think of FMP Tier 1, Phase 1 on that plan, what the current results are. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you, Noreen. So current results for the buildings we have going on currently, West Willow and Maple Grove, those are fairly recent pictures. Like everything else in the last 18 months, it's been a challenging time for construction and supply chain and COVID and everything else. So I would say that if any of us expected to have West Willow still going on right now, 18 months ago, I would have said you are crazy. There is no way we were going to be doing anything to this building in October. And then COVID hit, and then the derecho hit. So the good news is that kids were in the building on the first day. The bad news is that it wasn't 100% complete. So thanks to Greg and his staff out there to kind of rolling with the punches and doing the best they could with what we had. And we are just down to the bitter end there now. A lot of key moments last week. One of the playgrounds opened, the gym opened. We got our cafeteria tables, small things, but it's just amazing when you see the looks on those kids' faces when those little things happen, how excited they are to be in a brand new building. So super, super close on West Willow. Maple Grove, it's going very well. It is on schedule for construction to be complete in the middle of July, which then gives us time to get the furnishings in place. Staff moved in, staff settled, and then ready for kids on August 23rd-ish, whatever day that is next year, 23rd-ish. So far, contractors done a great job of trying to stay in front of the material delays. They're concerned, just like all of us are. The supply chain's crazy right now. Simple things. I couldn't get cover plates for outlets, which I thought, are you kidding me? I can pick these up from Menards. No, you can't right now. So far, everything's going well, and they're doing their best to get things ordered as early as they can so that they're here waiting and ready for us. That's really the update on the two buildings that we have going currently.
Now I'm going to address a little bit of financial analysis on the elementary side of things. As we, a little history walk here. Back in January 2018, the board did adopt the plan, the master facility plan for the elementary projects. And that was contingent on the extension of the SAVE revenue. And that actually got extended in spring of 2019 by the legislature, which allowed us to move forward with the plan. And at the time, with the numbers that were gathered at the time, it was believed that the estimated cost of the plan was going to be $224 million. And that was based on the prices that we had back in 2017. And with a 15 to 20 year implementation is kind of what the thought was on that plan. And the plan called for a construction of 10 new buildings and renovate 3. The we do 9 600 capacity schools. And at the time, it was estimated that those buildings would cost around $20 million. And then the one 450 capacity building would be around 650. And So the renovation of the 3 elementary schools, the hope would be, once we renovate, that they would be able to handle 600 kids as well. So I wanted to share that with you because there's some conversation out in the community about being over budget and whatnot. I wanted to share what the basis was back in the time when we actually shared that with the board. And as we all know, prices always go up. Every year prices go up. And so I wanted to share that with you. So, where have we been with the West Willow and Maple Grove? Well, we bid out West Willow back in April of 2020, and that project budget ended up, which is all in costs, was $25.38 million. We think that number is going to be less when all the dust settles. We're going to be less than that because some of those numbers had contingency dollars built in and whatnot. The actual project will actually be less than that when it's all said and done. So when we bid out Maple Grove, that was bid out in January 2021, and at that time when we went out to bid, we thought the bids, we had a projected budget of $25.86 million is what we were thinking they would come in at that time. The actual project budget ended up being, after bids, came in at $24.72 million, about $1.1 million less than what we were going into the bid thinking it was going to be. As John mentioned, we're hoping that the project will be done in July of 2022, and we financed the project with a combination of save revenue bonds. We issued 2 rounds of bonds already, and a total of $16.46 million. Plus, we're going to cash flow the remainder with our fund balance that we had on hand with save revenue. So the difference will actually cash flow. Oh, wow. Thank you. Now, what's the next steps on the elementary? Like Noreen mentioned, we are in the paused spot. So we are in this pause, so the committee can review everything and identify the next schools that we're going to end up doing in the elementary project. Financing of these projects will always be a big concern. We're going to make sure that whatever the plan that we do, it aligns with our availability of save revenue moving forward. So that is very important on the elementary side, because on the secondary building side, we've always said anything that we do on the secondary building side will have to be funded with general obligation bonds. And so, but elementary side, we're going to try to fund it all with save revenue. So the total save revenue is impacted by district enrollment. It's a per pupil kind of allocation, how the formula works for the state allocation of the sales tax revenue, how much the state collects. So if the sales tax revenue falters, our allocation amount per pupil would go down. And other commitments. We actually have committed to things such as technology for our schools, non-instructional software and facility leases, some of the things that we do currently have earmarked to use saved revenue for. Those play into it. So if we, for example, needed to readjust some of our technology needs, that would play into the total available money in the future. So then we also got to establish the budget for the next project reflecting the estimated construction costs, because we know construction costs are going up every year. So when you break it down by square footage for, say for like Maple Grove, that came in about all-in cost about $256 per square foot. So when you kind of do the math. So if you think of 3% per year, potentially growth, increase in construction costs, those numbers go up. Thus, the overall cost of the project could go up depending on the construction costs, and we have to account for that in our budget when we're moving forward. Then, when we do move forward, we'll have to issue some more save revenue bonds. That would be kind of, we'll have to do, we'll go through all that process. We've done that many times as a district, and we'll do that. And then we'll continue to monitor our save revenue as we're going through in the future to make sure that we have the bond coverage levels that we need to maintain to be able to issue bonds, and the timing of those, and so we can kind of continue with the project or the implementation of the plan.
Thanks, Dave. So that is kind of the FMP Tier 1, Phase 1 implementation analysis. And then also, we know that in the implementation of the pause on the plan, we'll have to determine through the data those next steps for our elementary plans. So now, as committed for the original Facility Master Plan Task Force recommendations, the assessment process for our secondary buildings and digging in of what we might need in those levels as well. So I'll hand it over to John.
So as secondary buildings go, currently, we do have PEPAL dollars that we get to spend on both elementaries and the secondary facilities. And so far, we've been pretty fortunate that we've been able to stretch those dollars quite a ways to get some things knocked off the list versus kind of the break, fix, repair part. So just a few projects that we've been able to accomplish that were part of the PEPAL promise that was adopted by the board 7 years ago, I believe. 7 years ago. So we've been able to do some bleacher improvements at our secondary levels, some ADA compliance projects between elevators and bathroom remodels. I'm probably forgetting some things. Really, ADA is one of those things that kind of comes into play in just about every project. But those are kind of two targeted projects that really affect ADA. Some auditorium improvements, upgrading some seats at our high school levels and a couple of our middle school levels as well. And then really the rest of it, I shouldn't say the rest, a lot of it is just kind of the ongoing maintenance projects, some of the things that you don't really see or aren't all that exciting and newsworthy, but very, very important. Things like flooring projects, concrete and asphalt replacement, roofs. Thank you to Rachel for giving us a jump start on that last year. We do all those annually. So some of the things that are on our radar that we don't have a designated project for in PEPAL, but we know that are going to be coming up just because of the age of the systems. Aging HVAC systems. So if I remember correctly, our oldest geothermal building at the secondary level is 20 years old. Those components, depending on the components, are roughly a 15 to 20 year time frame. So we have done some updating on those, or break fix per se, but at some point in time, you really got to look at that. At what point in time do you stop putting Band-Aids on things and a break fix, and do you plan for a larger type replacement? Now that's not like the original HVAC projects in those buildings where that was the complete systems. This would be components. So for example, it may not be the boiler, but it may be the heating cooling unit that feeds the classroom. So components and not the entire system. I just want to make sure that was clear, that we're not looking at spending another $20-something million on HVAC projects already at the secondary level, but components, so smaller in nature. Then along with that, outdated building automation systems, and that's really the things that control the temperature in the buildings and makes the systems run. Just like the systems are outdated, or the components are outdated, so are the systems that operate them. So Noreen mentioned, we do have an architect that is doing some assessments at the secondary level for us. So kind of what this will tell us that we don't necessarily know, or that we aren't the experts in, and that's why we asked them to help us with this, is what do we have at athletic and activity spaces? What are our needs there? What do we lack? What do others have that we want to have? How do we stay competitive in those types of areas? I think that ends up being pretty important. And that was kind of interior. So exterior athletic field needs. If anybody drives by our middle schools and looks at our tracks and our football fields that we have there, they could need some love. Site circulation and parking needs, as far as parent drop-off, bus drop-off, just how the traffic flows through our lots. What can we get better at there? What can we change there to make that better? Existing space capacities, educational spaces that don't currently exist. What educational opportunities are our secondary kids missing out on because we don't have those types of spaces in our buildings? Maybe partly due to the age, maybe partly due to the programming, but what can we add for them that gives them opportunity that they may be able to get elsewhere? Kind of going with that, the 21st century learning environments, safety and security improvements, and then again, ADA compliance improvements, and that's probably not necessarily designated projects for ADA compliance, but something that's always in the back of our minds while we're doing projects and while they're doing assessments. That'll be in the back of their minds as well.
Thanks, John. And as Dave rolls in here for the last notes on finances, as we looked at that former facility master plan and implementation, knowing that we had to reassess the secondary buildings, we also knew that the save allocation, as Dave described earlier, could pick up some additional smaller projects along the way while staying focused on the grander facility master plan of implementation at the elementary schools. So the question then becomes, if for improvements at the other levels of schools, what does that look like and what would that mean for our district as we move forward? So I'll hand it over to Dave for that piece.
Yeah, one of the big pieces of information that we really need from OPN as well as identifying the project is kind of putting a price tag on all the projects. That is huge for us to help prioritize what we can do and moving forward. But a part of that, like we said before, was it was all going to be funded with GO bonds. And so we have, as a district, we paid off our last GO bond in FY21. We made our last payment. And so we have zero GO bond debt as a district as of right now. So it does create an opportunity that we can look at that way to be able to address our secondary buildings. And there are, I'm sure when OPN shares the information, the data with our committee, it will be probably an eye-opener of the things that they have identified. And so one of the things you have to be mindful is what's our debt limit that we have as a district? Well, our debt limit, which is calculated as 5% of your assessed valuation of your district less outstanding debt you currently have on hand. That's how you come up with that number. It's $438 million is what we have a capacity to borrow money against for any projects that are identified as a district. And so if we decide to move forward with anything, when would be the next date that we could actually put that in front of the voters? The two dates in this next year is March 1st or September would be the two dates that we would be able to put a vote before our community for our passage of any debt limit of any limit, that we would, our debt of whatever we would put before our community. And so those are the two dates that we have to keep in mind. If we are going to move forward, those are the dates that we have to keep in mind. So,
thank you, Dave. John, we certainly are going to be open to questions. This was this is exciting work and presents opportunities for our students. We do look forward to officially having a ribbon cutting in the near future at West Willow. We've been delayed, as John described. It's just been challenged to get everything that we need, but everybody really deserves to celebrate the vision of our community and embrace the beginning of the implementation of that FMP story. So we look forward to the work ahead, but we know that we have to dig in and find out some of our next steps. So very open to questions from the board.
Well, first of all, thank you, Superintendent Bush and John and Dave, for giving us an update. And I'm going to open it up to board members if they have any questions or comments.
I have a question about the membership on the steering committee. And you said we had a good response, which is wonderful. I think it's great that we have wide participation from the community and from our staff. Is there a process in determining how many of those 60 folks will be invited to be members? Will they all be invited? I'm assuming we'll be very careful about representation from all parts of the city and all parts of the population. I don't know, can you address the steering committee?
Absolutely. So I think at this point in time, it wasn't by design. It certainly was, I guess, by luck. We had a really nice representation from all levels, that being elementary, middle, high school, and even early childhood, reaching out to be part of that, as well as demographics, as well as staff and community members. So I think at this point in time, our hope would be to invite the members everyone who's raised their hand. That was about the size of the former Facility Master Plan Task Force, and some of the membership folks have different roles or responsibilities, and they were just taking a pass at this point in time, which is A-OK. And also some of them were staff members who are no longer with us as well. So at this point in time, we're feeling pretty confident about the list that we have to invite all those members to at least take a start and see if you can join us for all of the journey ahead. I will say that when I look at the former data, it started with about 60 members, but by the end of the work, it was down to kind of a core group. And I know folks' calendars get busy, so it may not continue to be 60 depending on those who want to continue to be part of the process.
Okay. I have a comment, but I'll let the other directors ask their questions first.
Can I follow up on that? On the 60 people, do we usually have those committee, like the people on the committees, is that listed for the public to see? Like, will I be able to know?
It
as
will
a
be.
community
Yep,
member?
we are just wrapping that up. So the survey closed last week, and we're just tightening up. Got to reach out to those folks who've said yes and get them the official invitation. But yes, you'll be able to see that.
What would be the plan is, I think it's nice we have 60 and the diversity and the demographics, but what will you guys put in place in case people start dropping off so we can keep the momentum going? What have you put in place for that?
So I think we learned a lot through our boundary study work last year. And so one thing that now granted, I realize that was in the midst of the heaviness of our pandemic. We did offer in-person focus group sessions. So that's an additional component. So we'll have our FMP task force meetings, but in addition to that, we have to have a little bit of maybe more of a road show for focus groups to update folks and maybe virtual updates. Our most attended boundary study implementation or input last year was actually our virtual meeting. And so we had a live session at a couple of our school auditoriums. We had certainly some members of our community came, and we greatly appreciated that. But the virtual meeting was very well attended, the most populated. And then in addition to that, we recorded that session and we sent it out to the community and got additional input from anyone who wanted to provide input. And I think that we got very good feedback from that actually impacted our decision-making around the boundary studies. So I think we'd like to apply that again to this process. So there'll be the task force, some information that's synthesized by the task force, and then share that out into the smaller communities.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a question about staffing. I think that having a 4-section grade is just awesome opportunity for grade level collaboration on a daily level, especially that we have 4 specials now, so that we've got all of our grade level teachers together to collaborate and develop some individualization for students. I'm wondering what approaches have been used to make sure that we're getting that staff input on how that is working or not working, what lessons have been learned, what will include moving forward, and what we will omit.
So, and I'm looking at Deputy Superintendent Quicker, feel free to jump in at any time here. So truly, Viola Gibson is our only 4-section building, maybe a couple of our sections here and there throughout our other buildings. West Willow's not full yet, so it's not 4 sections yet, but it will be in the future. And so one thing that we've learned from this past year as we've done the boundary study, and then really the staff that's been greatly impacted about where their next steps will be has been Truman staff. So we did a survey with the Truman staff about their greatest hopes for grade levels, even what they hope to teach. That's a very small building, with mostly 2 people teaching at each grade level. And what was important to them around their grade level, what they were hoping to teach, where they were hoping to teach, who they were hoping to teach with. And so we got that input. And then hats off to Executive Director Christensen at the elementary level, who's worked very closely with the 3 principals, especially Ms. Kuba from Truman, in order to navigate those next steps. So that's just happened recently. Also, CREA's been involved with that. Tanya Johnson's done some assisting and understanding what teachers were hoping for. But it's not just teachers, it's also the rest of the staff that supports that building. So as we decide in repurposing of what Truman's next steps will be, there's still some staff members that are wondering, where am I going to be in the future? We do have opportunity for them within our system. And so it's just been a lot of listening and getting feedback and learning along the way. And so I think that the process we've put in place is listening to staff voices first and families as well, and then doing our best to navigate that moving forward. It's not perfect, that's for sure, but doing our best to try and navigate that. Also, we have to have people supporting where the children are going to be. So as much as we want to give everybody their first choice, we also have teaching spots that need to be filled to support our kids.
Right, thank you. So my follow-up to that would be, is there a framework for when those 4-section grades are being formed? Is there a framework that'll kind of help through collaborative effort and how to support them in maybe a different delivery method? Is there?
So that is a great question, and I have had the opportunity to reflect with the Viola Gibson staff recently on their building improvement plan efforts and how they're doing their design efforts. So this is what was referred to earlier in a comment, their professional learning community work. So when you look at that collaborative effort, it's a team of 4 on a grade level. What are they all teaching at the core level? And then also, how are they sharing the practice of differentiating instruction and targeting individualized instruction for students? So as you're talking about the instructional level, that's the great benefit of having 4 people on a team, is sharing best practices for instruction and sharing lots of planning efforts as well in planning for instruction. So that's the best practice design moving forward. And that's what we use also with our high reliability schools framework. And we have metrics in which we use to help design some of that work. Hence the request for more time for that time for teachers to plan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I apologize if I missed this. Like, if I'm writing and listening at the same time, it doesn't always go in. Did we talk at all about how we determine what happens to repurposed buildings?
There's been some things that I've learned along the way of our own history and what we've done in the past. In the current state, it's really assessing what the needs are of our district. And some things have popped up recently in the past 2 years that I don't know if we would have anticipated those being our needs. But in the past, maybe John, if you have any facility I'm thinking about, were you here with Monroe and Director or Secretary Day was a part of the repurposing of Monroe? But I think what's happened over time is, what does the community need? What's the niche of that particular building, and how are we meeting a need? Some of our buildings have been sold in the past to a community effort to support a community need. There are some areas that we're finding that are needs. One in particular is early childhood and preschool. It's coming up a lot. The nice thing about Truman specifically is it is a 1-floor building that has housed preschool in the past. It has some very nice accessibility as well. And if we were to think about opportunities there and funding streams, that might be something that we could consider for Truman specifically. Also, the input from the neighborhood very much was, we understand this is no longer going to be an elementary school, but we would love it to still be an educational component to it. We originally had some members of the community reach out and were wondering about it being a care facility for more than one type of demographic community members who might need that need. Haven't had those reach outs recently, but we think that we have some needs of our own that need to be met perhaps within that building.
Thank you.
Director Garlock, did you have another question?
No, I don't have a question, but I have a comment, and I know that you're all going to hear this a lot from me as we embark on this next phase of the facilities plan. And, the community, I think, has made a very clear commitment at the county level and at the city level to always do our best to address climate change. And I think this is an opportunity for the school district to join in with the city and county and lead by example. I know that we have taken steps at our 2 new buildings to be green friendly. I would encourage us to be a little more aggressive in how we deliver our energy to our buildings, maybe explore some alternative sources of energy, and just figure out how we can be better stewards of this earth that we're living on. I think it sends a message to the community, but more importantly, it sends a message to our students about how to treat the earth that they're living on. So you'll hear me repeat that often. Thank you.
President Humbles. Thank you for repeating, yes. Director Merschbrock.
Comments following up on what Director Garlock said. I think we should have a big conversation with the community about the types of investments we should be making, climate change and renewable energies in relation to our facilities being one of them. And because of that, I think March 1st is much too soon to take a vote like that to the community, because we need to get buy-in if we're going to have that big conversation. And the other comment is for the board as a whole. You know, during the last couple of years, we've always found time to have these updates, see what the new buildings would be looking like. And it's great to have this long-term future look. We've had a lot of comments here tonight that aren't on our agenda: COVID, working conditions for our teachers. And, you know, I could say more about the facility master plan, but I'd rather we talk about those things as a board and getting some solutions for the people working in our buildings and for the health and safety of our community. So just wanted to say that as well.
I have an additional question. So I'm just wondering, this is probably for Dave, in possibly not because we're a school system, I'm just wondering if we're eligible for any ARPA capital funding for like water and sewer when we're or shared community space when we're developing buildings.
Well, that's a good question. I'd have to do some research to actually figure out if we could even tap into. I know you can do, do projects shared with the city or county and those types of things. If they have access to funding of that we may not, that there could be some possibilities on that. But I wouldn't be able to answer that question without doing some additional research on that. So.
There is a possibility for some collaborative effort there.
So I know we can do some collaborative efforts, but it would have to be, do they have it? And we don't have the authority to do that, but they have the authority to do that, so.
Gotcha. And then I just want some clarification. I just want to be extra super duper clear that we are, from an equity lens, we're looking at elementary and secondary as two separate. We're not going through a needs assessment right now and going, well, maybe we'll do a middle school next. We're going to do secondary as a separate project from elementary.
So we are committed to the original facility master plan of the elementary school projects. So we have to assess where to go next on the elementaries. And you're right, secondly, we have to assess our secondary buildings. As part of that original plan was, let's start with elementaries, but we can't just let our secondary buildings sit in need and not address that too. So yes, these are two big whoppers. So if we have allocated the funds for the elementary funding. Mm-hmm. If we were to do any secondary projects, we would have to go towards a GO bond effort. And that would be visioning, to your point, Director Merschbrock, with absolutely visioning. We do know that there's some projects that we would like to be able to complete. So for example, middle school entryways. We've been able to chip away at those a little bit over time in the past, 6 or 7 years. But we still have a couple more to go, and we know that there's needs in our secondary buildings. And as John described, the kids at West Willow and their excitement and what they've been embracing, all of our children deserve access to the very best facilities we can provide to them, as well as that includes the outdoor spaces as well. We have very suitable buildings right now, but we know that we have an opportunity perhaps to do better.
Sure, and I think that including secondary focus while we're looking forward is especially important, given, as Superintendent Bush, you had mentioned, every one of our school buildings was damaged during derecho. So I think that changes a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just clarify, so the GO bond, when we say that the next available dates are March 1st and September 13th, a decision has not been made to do that, right?
No, we just wanted to make sure you knew what the next available dates were. if there's something that we wanted to accelerate, March 1st would be the most, the soonest we could go for a GO bond, and September would be the next. This is one thing to also know about how the process works is, in a neighboring district in Johnson County did not have their bond pass in September. You have to wait 6 months before you can put anything back onto a ballot. And so if there were to be a process where the board approved and had the desire to go to March, there would be a 6-month cushion in order to, if things didn't go as planned in March, we could put something else into September. That is not the case between the September and the following March date. We don't make the 6-month cuts. You'd have to wait another year. So that's something that you all should be aware of as well. If we did September 2022, the next, and if a GO bond was not supported by the community, but the desire was to move forward, we would have to wait another year before we could put that on the ballot. 23 would be the next opportunity.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions from the board? Once again, thank you all for the update. And with no further business, our meeting is adjourned.